I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Yo, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Thank you all for joining us live. Thank you all to those who are joining us later via the replay. Please make sure you're subscribed at blackpowermedia.org, following at Black Power MEDI, the number 1 on Twitter. Of course, I'm at I Mix What I Like and I mixwhatilike.org, but primarily make sure you're all signed up at blackpowermedia.org. Consider joining and becoming a member here at the channel as well to support all that we're doing and expanding. Up at 11 o'clock Eastern time when we're talking about community control of the police with Pan-African Community Action. And then later today, this evening, commemorating Malcolm X with a roundtable of those of us who contributed to a live reinvention correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X. Have a sort of an all-star lineup set up for that as well. And so much of it relates to what's happening today. So I want to get right to our guest. Obviously, Dhoruba bin-Wahad, a longtime, favorite of this platform. In terms of, he's still my favorite, certainly living philosopher, political analyst, historian, activist. He is a former member of the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, and even more particularly relevant for what we're going to talk about this morning, the Panther 21. And in the context of all of that, and I welcome you. Good morning, Dhoruba. We're going to talk about both Judas and the Black Messiah, the movie purporting to be about Fred Hampton. But Dhoruba, first, good morning, or at least good afternoon from where you are. But I wanted to start actually with the breaking news from yesterday that was announced and just one quick second, Dhoruba, I want to share this screen so that you and others can see what I'm talking about, because there was this news broken yesterday about the deathbed confession of, that'd be a problem. That would be a problem. Hold on a second. I think I had one issue with my connection here. Let me try to reconnect here real quick. The deathbed confession of Raymond Wood, who, all right, let me come back to that. Sorry about that. Who, it was announced through the lawyer Ben Crump, was an undercover agent with Bossy, the Bureau of Special Services and the NYPD, and was involved in setting up Malcolm X by infiltrating his organization, removing the security that would have been there to protect him the day of his assassination, of course, this day in 1965, and then was also involved in setting up what would become known as the Panther 21, of which you, Dhoruba, were one. And he is mentioned by name in a book that you have contributed to.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Hold on. Let me mute you one more time. Real quick. No, yeah, I just wanted to you mentioned. Anyway, the news broke that this guy, confessed on his deathbed. They gave a press conference at the Audubon Ballroom yesterday, where Ben Crump, the nominally putative people's attorney, representing the daughters of Malcolm or maybe the nephew of Raymond Wood, who read the statement. He reads it, Reggie Wood, that is. He reads the statement of his now dead uncle Raymond Wood, who said, I feel horrible. I was coerced into infiltrating these organizations and snitching and creating schemes and creating the plot that said you all were going to blow up various institutions and buildings in New York City. He felt horrible for it. And then I thought it was really kind of interesting that that it's presented as almost the way William O'Neill is presented in the Judas film, where we're being asked to see the humanity of the infiltrator, where we're being asked to understand the context and the emotions and the perspective of the infiltrator. And then his nephew literally ends the press conference by saying that this is the greatest country in America. He feels terrible that his family played a role in this, and he says, "God bless America," and then walks off the podium. So I thought it was perfect that we had just ended up setting up this discussion, and I wanted to get your thoughts if you had any memories of Wood himself or of the infiltration that set you and the Panther 21 up, and then maybe we can talk more about specifically what you wanted to say about the Judas film.
Jared, thanks for allowing me to get back on the program. Let me say this. I've been saying for the last several weeks, since the election started, since the U.S. presidential election and had started, that we're living right now in a particular historical moment that I call the season of the switch. And the season of the switch involves substituting black faces in high places as if we're moving beyond the paradigm of white supremacy and racism and that America has been constructed around. And so we have a former California Attorney General, Kamala Harris, who's the vice president, who's a heartbeat away from being the administrator of the empire. We have a born-again racist, Joe Biden, who's talking about bringing America together and refuses to denounce white supremacy as the foremost terroristic threat to America since the 1950s. Okay, it ain't like white supremacy has been a threat, and it's not like law enforcement just discovered it. Don't forget that the Birmingham bombing, the murder of Emmett Till, had all FBI infiltrators amongst the Ku Klux Klan members who committed those crimes. And J. Edgar Hoover knew that at the same time that he was dogging Martin Luther King. But in relationship to what you want to say about this particular black policeman, I don't think that this generation understands the radical history that they come from, and that how the white supremacist construct of America has always had to control the narrative of black self-determination and the black community and the development of poor people in this country. And it's very important to understand that, because when we try to humanize the traitors and humanize the snitches, and they do so in a fashion and in a manner that causes the people who are viewing this process, this humanization process, whether it's a movie, whether it's film, whether it's a book, to question themselves and their own ability to resist the type of pressure and to stand up for something that they believe in. So the whole idea of a Judas and the Black Messiah is to play into the Christian notion of the traitor Judas that everyone knows in the Bible, who Jesus denounced. And said that he would denounce him before the cock crows, and that's what he did for money. And the Black Messiah to be someone who would come along and save black people, as the Jewish Messiah was supposed to save the Jews in Judea. Of course, that's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. O'Neill was a piece of shit. He was a snake. He was a traitor, and we were at war. What do they do with traitors and snakes at war? What does the United States Army have in its manual of military discipline to when they catch an enemy infiltrator, dressed in the clothes, dressed in the uniform of an American soldier behind their lines? They shoot him straight away. Straight away, they shoot him. So, having said that, why do we, a black producer, a black director, humanize a snitch, humanize a traitor? Why? Because at this particular point in time, In this era of the season of the switch, we have to believe that black folks and black snitches and that America is still redeemable. That we, if we commit atrocities, that we could plead to God and to our Creator on our deathbed and say we regret what we did, but God bless America, and exit stage left. You see, so we need to understand what this really means. It means that that the portrayals that we have of snitches, like in the film with Fred Hampton, does not really portray what the government was about and what the counterintelligence was about. Fred Hampton was not killed and murdered and assassinated because he was a charismatic young leader. Okay, he was killed and assassinated because the counterintelligence program at that particular juncture understood that if the Black Panther Party really assimilated and put in place its national leadership from the activists from around the country in terms of formulating its central command and central committees and its policies, that it would be a much more potent a vehicle for the expression of Black power. And that could not happen. And it's the same thing in New York. The Panther 21 were not indicted because, as we now know, we were plotting to blow up Abercrombie and Finch and do all those things that they said we would do. We were indicted because New York was the media capital of the world, and Harlem was basically the spiritual and cultural center of Black America. And the Black Panther Party chapter in Harlem was the one that was the members or the defendants in the Panther 21 case. Almost all the defendants in the Panther 21 case came from Harlem. Okay, and we need to understand that. And Gene Roberts was an infiltrator into Malcolm X's organization, was on a security detail in Harlem. And that mosque number 7 that Malcolm X had was in Harlem. And we need to understand that both Chicago and both New York, and especially Harlem, are focal centers for the media, are focal centers for information. Wall Street's in New York, and New York is the economic capital of the United States. So it was very important that if Black militancy, if Black power was to arise in the city of New York, if we were to get community control of police in New York, if we were to get the type of things that Jesse Gray was fighting for then, the tenants' rights, we were taking over buildings, Black people were taking over the Board of Education in Ocean Hill, Brownsville, and the teachers union at that time was predominantly Jewish and under the control of the JDL, the Jewish Defense League, and Maya Kahani's organization and Netanyahu were in Brooklyn at that time. So we need to understand that all of this Hollywood shit that they put on and these bogus shootouts and all of this crap in order to appeal to a generation who were not there, who do not have in touch with their radical tradition and stroke their emotions and stuff about this is bogus.
Dhoruba, let me just jump in real quick so I can get this crazy ad off the screen. But I just wanted to point out very quickly that your comrades had called out the Ray Wood, who was also known as Ray Woodall, in Look For Me in the Whirlwind book that you and the Panther 21 collectively published. And Bob Collier says here, a few weeks later, a cat named Ray Woodall came out of nowhere. He came on strong and radical and visited me a lot, talking about politics and about helping the people in the ghetto. Pretty soon, this Woodall character started talking funny and acting crazy. I felt something wasn't right, but I ignored it. Sure enough, the setup was revealed on February 16th, 1965, when I found out that I was being charged with the conspiracy to blow up the Statue of Liberty, the Washington Monument, and the Liberty Bell. It was the sweetest frame in the world. The evidence was pictures from the police file, no physical evidence of anything, no witnesses but the pigs. The courtroom was full of agents sitting around looking like Lucifer's henchmen. Anyway, so I just wanted to quickly point that out, that even though this was released as breaking news yesterday, as a deathbed confession of this man, you and your comrades had already been, sussed it out more or less, and this was already known to those who at least would have maybe even read this book. So whether or not this man confesses and maybe some good comes of it, I just wanted to point that out. Anyway, please forgive that interruption.
So now that clarifies that, because I hadn't read the article. Now I know who it all is. Bob Collier, who was a brilliant organizer on the Lower East Side of New York. He had brought the Chicano community, the Puerto Rican community in the Lower East Side. He had organized them. He had organized tenants on the Lower East Side in the 60s. That's when a lot of young white hippies were crashing in the parks and in the area, and there was a lot of tension. Now, Bob Collier was also in one of the indicted defendants in the Statue of Liberty case, which involved RAM, I believe. It was the Revolutionary Action Movement. So this particular snitch had probably infiltrated RAM and that organization, and of course the RAM followers, the initial leaders, were advocates and very close associates of Malcolm X. They really related to Malcolm's politics. They shared his politics, and of course we know that RAM was in Harlem. So we need. So now I understand that. But there were 3 black undercover detectives: Ashwood, Gene Roberts, and another one.
It's not this guy Wood?
Ralph White. No, that's what I was saying. This guy Woodall is the one that set up Bob Collier in the Statue of Liberty case. You understand what I'm saying? That conspiracy indictment preceded the Panther 21, and it had nothing to do with the Black Panther Party. It was 1965. We had a secret indictment brought against us in 1969, April of 1969. And that's when we were indicted. And it's very important for people who don't understand this, and I'm going to talk about it some, inshallah, about 1969. Because 1969 was this period of time that I was talking about, that the counterintelligence program felt that it had to make some radical moves. I don't know if you read this recent article that came out about the trial of a Black Panther, the so-called interrogation of Alex Rackley in New Haven. It's in a New Haven newspaper. And they go into a long, long article about how Alex Rackley, after we were arrested, was spirited away to New Haven and taken down to the basement and interrogated and tortured because he supposedly knew all the informers in New York by face and by name, and all of this. And then Bobby Seale came down there and came down to the basement, saw Alex Rackley, and basically, according to the indictment, told the snitch, and this was a snitch that was doing this torturing. We need to understand this was an undercover agent that was torturing Alex Rackley. He went from chapter to chapter, bringing the police down on different chapters, and he went to Chicago too. He went to Detroit. And after he went to Detroit, the Detroit office was raided. He went to Boston, they were raided. So we need to understand that this was an undercover agent, a paid informant that was torturing Alex Rackley. Now, who was Alex Rackley? I knew Alex Rackley very, very personally. He was very, very personally. He was autistic. Alex Rackley was autistic. He lived in Harlem. He lived in the building next to the Black Panther Party office at 2026 7th Avenue. Now, Alex Rackley, like I said, he was autistic, and he was a very nice guy. He was young. So we used to keep him in the office and let him hang out during political education classes, and he would volunteer and sweep out the office and clean the desk, and he was always in the office trying to be useful. He would go run to get coffee for the day watch and all of this stuff. Okay, so when the Panther 21 was busted, myself and others who were close to Rackley, he really freaked out because we were like his family. He really freaked out, and nobody knew how to deal with him because he was autistic. This snitch, this piece of shit, I forgot his name. He's the one that took advantage of the vacuum in the Panther 21 bust immediately after we were arrested in April. And Bobby Seale and David Hilliard came to New York as a result of this. They flew into New York. They were on their way to Yale University up in New Haven. And the bus came down. And David Hilliard managed to talk to my attorney, Gerald Lefcourt, and visited me. Now, the reason why he visited me was because at that time I was the field secretary of the East Coast Black Panther Party. And he came in to the Tombs where I was locked up. All of us who were busted in the Panther 21 were held in different areas in different prisons initially when we were first arrested. And we were held in isolation. So my lawyer managed to get David in, I believe it was Bob Bloom or what's his name, my lawyer, Gerald Lefcourt. And we had a brief 10-minute visit. And David Hilliard told me, and he was the chief of staff of the Black Panther Party. You got to remember, Huey P. Newton was in jail at that time. So David Hilliard and Bobby Seale were the leading members, and Eldridge Cleaver were leading members of the Central Committee of the Black Panther Party. Eldridge was in exile. So him and Bobby had came through New York, and David told me face to face that he was going to close the chapter of the Black Panther Party in Harlem because it was infiltrated, and the New York chapter was infiltrated, and he had to close it. And I told David that that was not a wise idea, that Harlem was the cultural and political capital of Black America, and for it not to have a Black Panther Party chapter was to admit defeat to the enemy, was to abandon our people's radical traditions in Harlem, and he had to keep it open. He said, well, he'll think about it, but if he did, he was going to send some other folks from somewhere else to try to get it under control. I said, cool. Him and Bobby then went up to New Haven, and what I told you happened with Rackley happened, and Bobby was indicted, and a warrant was put out for him, and he was arrested and held in New Haven. Now, you got to remember, we were arrested in April of 1969, and I believe the Republican convention, I don't remember the exact month, but I believe Bobby Seale either spoke before the 21 at the Republican National Convention or immediately thereafter. But he spoke at the Chicago rally around the Republican Convention, which turned out to be a police riot. And he spoke and he left. And I believe he flew east. So he might have spoke just before the 21 case. If you look up the exact date for the Republican Convention that week, you would get the idea of what Bobby's itinerary might have been. Okay? So when Bobby was incarcerated and the Panther 21 were indicted, and Eldridge Cleaver was in exile, and Huey P. Newton was in jail, the Central Committee of the Black Panther Party was led by David Hilliard. And basically in consultation, daily consultation with Huey, who was in prison. I used to fly out to the West Coast almost every weekend during the Panther 21 trial to do a cassette tape that Charles Gary, Huey's attorney, would take into him, and to report on events on the East Coast. I was field secretary, and I would do that. And so what transpired was that the Black Panther Party was under attack. We understood that the anti-war movement had gained such prominence and such fervor, and the Black students across the country were closing down universities. San Francisco State was on strike. The LA chapter had gotten raided. I believe Bunchy and John were killed. It was a crazy year, 69. I hope you get what I'm trying to say, Jared. So the COINTELPRO, if you look at the documents in my case, they were aware of all of this. And their job was, how could we make this lead to the total disintegration of the Black Panther Party? But at that particular moment in time, okay, the rise of the right wing in America was at a crossroads because of the civil rights gains in the South, because of the Voting Rights Act, because of the activism of the civil rights movement, and the cities were burning every summer. And every leader in the Black Panther Party in the local chapters was an activist in those communities that were burning before they joined the party. Okay? So the Black Panther Party was not a cultural organization. The original name of the Black Panther Party was the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense had an ideology of dialectical materialism. We believe that social development and social history was a scientific matter, and that if we approached it with a scientific approach, that we could devise solutions and paths to power that could empower us as oppressed people. We also took the example of other people who were struggling for their liberation, such as Mao Zedong and the Chinese people and the People's Liberation Army, who engaged in a protracted war against empire and against white supremacy to come to power in 1949. So having said all of this, the Black Panther Party's major feature of organization was democratic centralism. To those who don't know what democratic centralism is, it basically means that the leadership is responsible, is responsible to its rank and file, and that the rank and file has a voice in what the leadership does. So there's a democracy there, but there's a procedure there. But with no central committee, or with a decimated central committee, the Black Panther Party was essentially a California operation. And it had expanded during Huey's incarceration to over 15 or 16 chapters. New York and Chicago being the most significant. We sold the most newspapers, we had the most media coverage, and we had the largest cadres. Okay? So, at that time, when we were arrested, one of the things that myself and other Panthers on the East Coast were trying to get across to David and the Central Committee is that we had to democratize the Central Committee. We had to make it more stronger. We had to make it more representative of the African diaspora in the United States and the different Black Party chapters. Because every city had its own unique characteristics, had its own unique contradictions with white supremacy and the power structure in those cities, like Detroit, like New Orleans, like Chicago, like DC. They all had their particular features. And we were extremely sensitive to this. And the Counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover, in his memos, saw this. And he realized that if he could make a move against two of the most vital or the most vibrant aspects of this process, he could undermine it. Now in New York, the Black Panther Party had a large liberal left following, support, and they were predominantly Jewish. So what J. Edgar Hoover did was try to portray the Black Panther Party in New York and generally as anti-Semitic, as anti-Jewish, because we were in solidarity with the Palestinians. And if you notice, one of the major features in the Panther 21 case was when Leonard Bernstein gave a reception party to raise money for the Panther 21. And he was portrayed as a Jew hater, and I believe this writer, I forgot his name, wrote a book called The Black Mau Mau, Pimping the Black Mau Mau, something like that. He was deriding Jewish supporters of the Black Panther Party, who he labeled anti-Semitic and racist. This was a direct result, a direct part of the counterintelligence program that Hoover was running in New York. In Chicago, it was slightly different because you had Irishmen who were controlling the political machine in Chicago. Okay, you had an Irish mayor, the Irish mob, and the police department was on it like that. Fred Hampton, if we go back into his history, he initially was in the NAACP. And one of the major beefs of NAACP locally in Chicago was, of course, around housing, around police brutality, around the things they're still around. It was local. But once Fred became enamored to the Black Panther Party and the idea of armed self-defense, and the idea that we need to organize the lumpen proletariat, the unemployed, the street guys, the guys on the streets in the hood, that we needed to organize them into a force that could hold sway in the Black community against the racist armed agents of the state. Once he embraced that ideology, he became a target, of course. All of us were targets. We were at war. And has to be really understood, Jared. We were in a state of war because the counterintelligence program is a wartime operation. It means counterintelligence, okay? It's meant to counter the intelligence of your enemy, okay? And so I'm saying all of this to say that this culminated, of course, with the arrest of the Panther 21, right before right as we were organizing a national alliance against fascism. We were calling together a national front against white supremacy and fascism to be held in California. We called every anti-war group in America to come, every student group, every radical black group to come to, I believe it was California, and commit to organizing a national front against fascism and organizing national committees against fascism in every city so that we could bring on board community control of police, so that we could decentralize police departments, use the legislative process, the local power to change the power paradigm of police in local cities. And I guess this segues right into your program that's going to be following us, community control of police. And so we did that. That national front came together in 1970, I believe, right after we were arrested and busted. It came together, and Fred was killed, and we were in jail. And they called the National Front, and over 5,000 activists and radicals showed up, black and white, Latino, everybody showed up. And they organized over 12 NCCF chapters across America, okay? And Hoover understood what that meant. That meant that the Black Panther Party was taking leadership of the left in America, of the new left in America. And this could not happen. And so they used everything they could, even within the Communist Party USA, to deride the Black Panther Party. Look at what happened with the Communist Party USA vis-a-vis Angela Davis. How did Angela Davis come to fruition? How did she become famous? How did she become an icon? Did she become an icon because she was a communist baby? Because she was the chairman of the Che Lumumba Club, a reading club that followed the Marxist philosophy of Herbert Marcuse in the University of California? No. She came to prominence because of a relationship to George Jackson, who was in prison, a political prisoner who was in prison, a brilliant Marxist-Leninist, a brilliant revolutionary who became our prison organizer in the California prison system. That's how she came to prominence. And she came to prominence when Jonathan Jackson went into the courtroom in an attempt to free his comrades, his brother's comrades, and was killed. And she was connected to that, and she had to flee. And when she fled, it was the Communist Party USA underground that had to deal with Angela. And they couldn't handle it because the Communist Party was heavily infiltrated. And so in the handoff to the Black Panther Party underground, which people don't even know, in the handoff, Angela was busted. I know because I was there. So she became a cause celeb because the Communist Party used Angela Davis as a black woman to recapture the idea that the Communist Party was on the forefront of the black liberation struggle in America. She was posted up all around the world. Every Communist Party from Italy to Australia, you understand, had a Free Angela Davis campaign going on. Okay, her partner in crime, her partner who was indicted, Rochelle McGee, he was separated from her case, and he's still in jail today. And Angela came out and formed the National Committee or the National Alliance to combat police brutality or something like that, along with another activist, his name escapes me right now. And everything else is history, okay? But Angela Davis did not come to prominence because of her activism as such at that point. but as a consequence of the revolutionary radicalism of the Black Liberation Movement and the Black Panther Party at that particular time. And I could go on and on, but I just want to end there by saying that those who do not understand that the counterintelligence program is what killed Fred Hampton. The counterintelligence program is what killed every African American activist in the 60s, even from Marcus Garvey. In fact, although it began with the Communist Party in the post-World War years, after World War I, its major focus was on the Back to Africa movement, the Pan-African movement that Marcus Garvey raised. And Marcus Garvey was the first Black a national leader to fall victim to COINTELPRO. And then later would come Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and we can go on and on in terms of our martyrs. So I just wanted to put that in context and so we could understand what we mean now about the season of the switch here, and why the movie The Black Messiah and Judas and the Black Messiah will probably get a global award. Black folks will probably flock to the theater, say it's the most dynamic movie they ever saw in their lives. But I'm telling you, who lived through that, I'm telling you that we were at war, and that Fred was not killed because he was our savior. Fred was killed because he was a soldier in this war, and that the idea and the notion of Rainbow Coalition was a consequence of the Black Panther Party's a strategic vision to organize the left, to organize against white supremacy in this country across class lines and across lines of gender and age. And let me end by saying this, for all of those who are talking about black magic, black woman magic, and gay pride. The Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton were the first ones to write a memorandum recognizing the gay liberation movement and the role that the suppression of people's sexuality and their gender was counter-revolutionary, and the Black Panther Party endorsed that revolutionary trend and that movement. So, having said all of that, I'll say that that movie to try to humanize the snitch, that folks are talking about, it was a great movie, the acting was great. Well, I'm telling you that the major contribution of the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton and my comrades was not so much that we were successful in organizing those programs that everybody said that we organized, the breakfast program, the free lunch program, the health program. No. The major factor that saved that the Black Panther Party should go down in history for is that it delayed the consolidation of white supremacy and right-wing power in the United States by 12 to 15 years. It wasn't until Ronald Reagan and his trickle-down economy came. It wasn't until the suppression of the civil rights movement came. It wasn't until the 70s and crack, 80s and crack came that they were able to consolidate the power they have today, and that we have Joe Biden and we had a Negro in office for 8 years that did absolutely nothing for Black folks but save capitalism and save white supremacy. So I want folks to understand that the Black Panther Party was the Black Panther Party for self-defense. It was never the Black Panther Party for electoral politics. It was never the Black Panther Party for compromise. And that anybody that thinks it was, they could kiss my ass in Macy's window on Easter Sunday.
So Dhoruba, first of all, thank you for all of that. I know part of what we had talked about doing today was going through some of these points that have been popularly raised about the film and having you respond. If you're still set to do that, I can pull them up.
I'm ready.
One of the
I was
things
just warming up a little bit. I just want context.
Clearly, I got you. One of the things that that I raised that I'm happy to hear you point out is that in the film, the counterintelligence program is largely reduced to almost being like the fantasy and the sole sort of function of a lone crazy J. Edgar Hoover, who, as important as he was, I think you've laid out importantly, was really part of a broader state apparatus, but they kind of just dwindled it down to something so much more simplified than that. in the film and reduce him to being largely a madman, and singularly responsible for all the problems, even within the FBI. So, all right, well, here's one of the pieces that Brother Kenyatta, and shout out to him for arranging this discussion today, sent us to discuss 19 powerful moments from Judas and the Black Messiah. Number one, it says here, I never learned about this in school, no surprise, so I was eager to watch this portion of Black history. Let's see. Number one, when snippets of the uproar that followed Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination are shown. So I'm assuming that this is meant to suggest that the film accurately depicts how important King's assassination was in terms of influencing the development of the Panthers and Fred himself. Did you want to say anything about that?
Well, that's it. The Black Panther Party, that's backwards. One of the things, King's assassination, after King was assassinated, almost immediately, dozens of cities went up in flames in the United States, dozens of them. But because the Black Panther Party was an armed organization, it was an armed cadre organization, the members of the Black Panther Party were told to go into strict defensive mode, to protect our what we call Panther pads and officers, but to try to calm those folks who would take unnecessary or reactionary actions. Now, having said that, what actually happened, we know about the shootout with Eldridge Cleaver, don't we? Go back and look at the death and the murder of little Bobby Hutton. When did that occur? I believe it occurred the night after Dr. Martin Luther King was killed. The Black Panther Party was vamped on by the police. We didn't vamp on them, they vamped on us. And Eldridge Cleaver, was in that entourage. I believe little Bobby Hutton was killed, David Hilliard was there. They were all arrested. This was right after the murder of now I might be having a senile moment here, but I kind of remember it like that. And I mean, I could take things out of context. I'm 76 years old, so it ain't like, I got the sharpest memory in the drawer, I got to call Bob Boyle to find out details about my own life. So, and I'm still trying to find out, trying to find out what's happening. So anyway, so that was what happened. We have to understand that the police took the initiative after the assassination in many small ways on street people after that assassination. And they used that as a pretext and to murder, to burn, and to kill Black folks, talking about they were stopping the rebellions and stuff. So if the point in the movie here is that the Black Panther Party somehow came to prominence when Dr. King was killed, that's ass backwards. That's not true at all. The Black Panther Party was already prominent.
There was almost, I don't think that's what it was saying, but there was almost no real reference in the film to I mean, it was just a passing reference, and that there was an uptick in the
I think that the artistic
yeah.
I think that the artistic device that was being attempted was to show that when King was killed, that it was the Panthers that were let loose, like who let the dogs out now, you see. And there is some veracity to that, because I know personally that when Dr. King was killed is the moment I joined the Black Panther Party, and I was never a follower of King.
Given what you've already said, one of the other pieces that Brother Kenyatta sent us to contemplate for today, and I'll come back to that list in just a second, to that other list, but was an interview with the Grio's April Ryan, Bobby Rush, Congressman Bobby Rush, former Chicago Panther member with Fred Hampton. He's in this interview about the film, he says that Fred Hampton's assassination is the only one in American history to have been carried out with sanction and support by the state. I thought that was a very interesting claim, given all that the counterintelligence program has done. But he wanted to. He was very clear. He said, not Malcolm, not Martin, not the Kennedys, not even Abraham Lincoln could claim that particular distinction, because only Fred Hampton's killing was sanctioned by the state. I found it to be an odd characterization. But what did you think? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think much about anything Bobby Rush got to say. I mean, when Fred was killed, he was scared straight. And you notice that frightened dead look he got in his eyes. He had that shit in his eyes ever since Fred was killed. I don't know what that Negro was talking about. You know, we all know that white supremacy is a construct, and that law enforcement functions as the armed agents of the white supremacist state. So anyone that they killed is sanctioned by the state. But having said that, how was Fred actually killed? Let's look at it. It was this dude O'Neill, or whatever his name was. He was the one he was actually a dual informant from what some folks seem to indicate. But if he was first of all a federal informant. He worked for the FBI. He worked on the COINTELPRO. We got to understand that the COINTELPRO had a Black Matters desk. And the Black Matters desk filtered all of the local types of operations and whatever. And the Black Matters desk had a liaison with the local police department. And if we know in that Senate investigation into the counterintelligence program that took place, where they stopped was at the relationship between the FBI and local law enforcement. It's at that level between the FBI and local law enforcement that the sanctions that Bobby Rush claimed that only exists with Fred Hampton was done routinely. Okay. This snitch provided the Chicago Police Department with a diagram of the house where Fred was crashing, where he was sleeping, where he would be sleeping, and provided drugs to him to rock him to sleep. And the police came and they entered almost 90% of their rounds into the area that was designated in that layout that the snitch provided. Okay? So we ask, who is responsible for this? That the government, who is responsible for the death of Malcolm X? We're going to say that the CIA and the FBI didn't collude to create the type of animosity and hatred and division that they did in the same thing in the Black Panther Party. Huh? Well, look, I know from the files that I got in my case that the FBI had high-placed informants right inside the mansion of Honorable Elijah Muhammad. They did. And they talked about the jealousy and the envy of Muhammad's sons towards Malcolm. They knew all of that. So when Malcolm was killed, what we're going to say, oh, they didn't sanction it? Oh, it's not something that J. Edgar Hoover said, go out and kill Fred Hampton. Is that what he's saying? When Obama signed a kill order for drones, did he write down go kill so and so? No, he said identified primary target such and such. Should we eliminate or should we neutralize? State-sanctioned murder against African-American leaders have always been sanctioned by the state. I don't know what Bobby Rush is talking about. That's the same Bobby Rush that when I got out of prison, Alombe and Brath and I went to and asked them to bring out the counterintelligence program in the Congressional Black Caucus. And let's talk about how it's intimidating and undermine Black leaders. He told me he had too much on his plate, and he went to have a luncheon with some corporate shills, you see. So I don't take what Bobby Rush has to say seriously. He was always a punk. He was scared straight ever since Fred was murdered. He had that frightened deer look in his face.
Well, listen, there's another one that came up on this list that particularly I wanted you to address, because I think you somewhat mentioned it in one of your part of your opening comments. But one of the more powerful moments, according to BuzzFeed, was when Deborah Johnson tells Fred he's a poet, and if I remember correctly, that's specifically after she sort of politely chastises him for demeaning a brother in a dashiki. And at the beginning of the film, which is meant to quickly summarize what is popularly, I think, overly simplified as the beef between the Black Panther Party and either the US organization or cultural nationalism in general. So she's pointing out he's a poet and has the ability to move his people in ways that don't demean them should he choose. And again, whatever my biases may be, I have never appreciated the way that popular culture depicts that those differences. And I didn't like the way this film did that. But what do you think about that particular depiction of this clash, as it's often described, between the Panthers and us, or Panthers and cultural nationalism, or how it might have been depicted in this film, if you or others would agree with my quick summary of the scene?
I think it's bullshit. Let me say this. Like I said, every region had its own development. We look at how Black folks came to California. How did they get there during World War II? They came to work the Navy yards. They came to help build the Pacific Fleet and the fight against Japan. That's how Oakland came to be a predominantly Black enclave. That's how all of the Bay Area got its Black population. And they mainly came from places like Louisiana, Texas, and the South. And the crackers that became the police came from those places too. Okay? So there was a particular type of development there. Southern California and California never really had a serious cultural, nationalist, and Pan-African centered movements. They were not that type of center like Philadelphia or New York or Chicago or DC on the East Coast. Okay? And so a lot of folks in California at that time had a certain type of ambivalence, especially when Huey when Huey first encountered them over the security for Betty Shabazz. That's a classic encounter where the cultural nationalists showed up with empty guns. You see, they were fronting. And that became the idea of Panthers from the West, that Black nationalists, those who had Afrocentric views, were somehow fronting. They weren't street. They weren't real. Of course, he ain't ran up on niggas like us from Harlem yet. Okay, but having said that, even when I joined the Black Panther Party, or Sekou Odinga joined the Black Panther Party, or Lumumba Shakur, look at the names of the East Coast Black Panthers. Huh? They were all African names. And I know personally in the party, when I first went out to the West Coast, that they made certain assumptions because we had African names, until I got their Black asses back to Harlem, and then they could, they put their shit back in perspective. You see what I'm saying? But I'm just saying that, they didn't understand what was taking place. Having said that, then it is the reality of the counterintelligence program and how it used organizations like us and Ron Karanga to neutralize the popularity of the Black Panther Party in California, which led, of course, to the murder of John and Bunchy in LA, and so this and other murders, you see. And on the East Coast, this was not the same thing. And so Black nationalists on the East Coast tended to be followers of Malcolm X. And even the cultural nationalists, what we call the dashiki-wearing nationalists, they understood the value of Black armed self-defense and Black cultural identity. And Black cultural identity was not used as a placebo for organization of Black people. It was used to change our core material values in a capitalist society. It was more oriented towards our history as African people being more social, being more communal. And that's how it played itself out on the East Coast. If you notice that Leroy Jones, Amiri Baraka, was a close associate of Ram Karanga and started Al-Qaeda on the East Coast. But what was the difference? Al-Qaeda and Amiri Baraka in Newark organized a movement that resulted in the first black mayor of Newark. Okay, so this was some activist-based cultural nationalism. This wasn't no dashiki posturing. So this so-called phony dichotomy that Fred was a poet and he was demeaning somebody in the dashiki is totally bogus. You know, revolutionary nationalism, revolutionary Pan-Africanism, you can wear whatever you want. You know, it's about your relationship to the enemy. And we've always known that. Some of the best poets on the East Coast, we know, from all the way from the last poets to the brothers out of Brooklyn with Sonny Carson and his son. They were all Afrocentric, had African names. So we didn't make that type of distinction as a matter of policy. So that's bogus. But it's true that the counterintelligence program exploited that perception and used that against the Black Panther Party. For instance, many cultural nationalists, especially the academics, some of them who are prominent today, were talking about that the Black Panther Party had white folks in it and that we had alliances with white people and that we were like that and all of this stuff, and we weren't black enough. And so this continues to this day.
You know, there's a prominent film historian and bookstore curator in D.C. who publicly berated Huey Newton and the Panthers. As he said one day in his bookstore, all Huey wanted to do was cocaine and fuck white women. And anyway, so I mean, this is who
was this dude that wrote that? What was his name?
It wasn't written. It was a conversation that I was present for, and several of his film students and I guess acolytes in his bookstore.
Well, you know, I must say, there's a lot of guys like that because they were students at that time. All of these professors that used to say that now to young folks, they were students at that time. They wasn't doing jack shit on the campus, but marching around with dashikis and afros and having sisters walk 2 steps behind them, okay? They were the ones that you see today that many of them are punk ass heads of Afro studies departments. Yeah, they punks, the intellectual masturbators. They have all of this to say about radicalism. But what was their role in the 60s? What did they actually do when the guns was drawn, when the crackers were stomping us out, when we was talking about community control of police? What was they doing? What were they doing? They were matriculating through college. They were learning about their black self. And because we were able to lead white people to take a more radical stand against empire and against white supremacy, we were somehow only interested in sniffing blow and boning pointed heads. That's all we wanted to do. So what about the rappers today? What's their main interest? What's Jay-Z's main interest? He came up slinging yay yo.
Well, my question at the time, and still is, that's not what the counterintelligence programs thought was a threat and was targeting. If that's all the Panthers were doing, then I can't imagine.
We would have been superfluous.
I mean, that was my point. So I just found that to be disingenuous, but it's just something that.
But I just want people to understand that the majority of intellectuals who approach my age, who were around at that time, don't believe me, they wasn't on the front lines and on the streets. They were getting their degrees, they were matriculating through college, and that's cool, because I don't have no problem with that, as long as you produce revolutionaries. That's what teachers are supposed to do. Okay, but this is what they were doing at that time, and the Black Panther Party was on the front line. And if you don't believe me, there's a 1970 survey, NBC or CBS survey, national poll that was taken amongst black people in 1970, and they were asked, what black leader or what organization do they admire the most? And they said the SCLC, the Black Panther Party, and the NAACP. Now, how did the Black Panther Party become number two between two pacifist, nonviolent organizations whose politics is radically different? It's because black folks understood one thing and one thing that had to stand out, that we will defend the black community against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that we stand for our people with our lives. And they understood that. You can't say that about these pencil-pushing intellectuals that were matriculating through school in their dashikis and afros and wasn't doing jack shit but writing their thesis. So I don't want to hear that. That's why I asked who this knucklehead was, because now I'm 76. I could slap people my age and people won't say
I don't want to cause any of that, but it was highly Garima and Sanko for books. I mean, I was sitting right. And it was in the context of, and in fact, it was actually interesting because it was in the context, he was responding to a question I was asking him. This is 20 years ago, to be fair. But I was asking him a question about Fred Hampton and the Panthers. And I was asking specifically, would the Panthers fit within his view of maroonage? Maroonage, and because he was working on that at the time, and he said no, because the Panthers didn't create any new land or economies, they didn't run away anywhere, and then he went into this whole thing, which concluded with what I just said. He said, and that's a direct quote. I don't know. We didn't. He didn't. He's never felt me worthy of a real conversation about that, and that's understandable too. But that was all. That was as far as the conversation went. But I was just pointing out that these things still happen.
See, he didn't think you were worthy of a real conversation. You see how I could discern character from afar, man. You see how I could discern character from afar. Anyway, don't get it twisted. That sentiment is still rife amongst a lot of black academicians who I said played this type of role in the 60s. And they're kind of shy to do it now because of movies that come out about the Black Panthers, because young, bright-eyed people come forward, after reading the new Jim Crow and trying to get in touch with their radical history. But none of the students come and say to them, so before they ask this question, what was you doing in 1969, Professor? Oh, so I want to ask you about the Black Panther Party. If you ask that other question first, you get a whole different answer.
Well, we could come back to any of that you like, but
yeah. So let's get on to the next highlight.
Because one of the highlights here was when because again we're going through this list of the most powerful movements in the film, and one of them here is when Fred. Members of the Black Panther Party visit the Crown's arrival group proposing unification. This idea of politicizing street organizations. Do you have any thoughts about that? In the movie, they do show Fred showing up with his chapter to meet the leader of the Crowns and to talk about unification and politicizing street organizations. Now, my criticism of the scene initially was and still is that they used that scene instead of to focus on what was happening in terms of the real history of that, or even in the movie. It's really the backdrop for a tension building moment where William O'Neill might be exposed by one of the members of the Crowns who recognizes him as a snitch from a previous encounter. So it's almost like the drama of the meeting, to me, is weakened by the scene really being about this backdrop of will William O'Neill be exposed or not, and how he gets out of that situation. But what would you want to share with us about the relationship between black radicals in an organization like the Panthers or the BLA and members of street organizations, some of which, of course, were members of both. But what would you want to say about that?
Well, I think I didn't see the scene, and I didn't see the movie, so I didn't see the scene. But do you know, initially, I said that the Black Panther Party's focus of organization was street people on the streets. That was our initial. initial focus, what we call the so-called lumpen proletariat, okay? That we believe that the disenfranchised workers, the unemployed, the permanently unemployed, constituted a potentially revolutionary force that could be mobilized in the community to protect the community and to defend our community's integrity. You see? Now, as far as, like I said, I didn't see this particular movie, but I grew up in the South Bronx. And the largest two street gangs in the South Bronx were Sportsmen's and the Crowns. Everybody know that, okay? They didn't exist in Chicago. Chicago had another group with Jeff Fort and the Peastone Rangers, Peastone, okay? They were for Chicago. And I guess they didn't want to actually use their name because they didn't want none of those ex-Peastones to come kicking their lenses in. So they threw the Crowns in because they figure all the Crowns come from the Bronx and they probably did. So, but the relationship between the Black Panther Party and street organizations was very, very real. Yeah, they were the focus of much of our organization because they understood that the armed agents of the state, that the police was the enemy in the community. They understood what that meant. But because they didn't have any politics, because they didn't have any revolutionary principles, and they were just involved in common gangsterism, they were victimizing their own community. So the Black Panther Party always approached them from the point of view that they were potential revolutionaries and that they could participate in that, and they should come to our political education classes. In New York alone, whenever the street sets would rip off the local freight train carrying goods to the Brooklyn Navy Yard and steal some weapons or somewhere, they would bring them straight to the Black Panther Party and give us a discount. Okay? So we knew this, and you got to understand that this really has a double edge. It's a double edge because the snitch thing is kind of like real. Okay, because what they're saying is that the Black Panther Party is basically a criminal enterprise, and the gangs are basically a criminal enterprise. So the snitches are interchangeable. Are you still? Did you catch it? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I caught it. I caught it.
And to show you how that is, when we were underground as the Black Liberation Army, and the police was getting were suffering casualties, you know, the first place they went was to the street gangs and to the drug dealers and told them that they won't be allowed to sling their yayo, they won't be allowed to hang out in these streets until they gave us the killers of these cops. And then the street gangs will come back to our underground listening posters and say, bro, the police is leaning on us, man. I can't sling my, I can't do nothing, man. They want to, man, y'all just whacking these cops. So the police knew that our relationships on the street, from the street level up, was the strength of the Black Panther Party. Was always the strength of the Black Panther Party, was the streets, was the hood, was people, ordinary people. To this day, and I want to give this shout out, a whole lot of old folks who might be watching this, I mix what I like and can't never say nothing. They were Black people, married people, professional people who gave us their houses, their apartments, so that we could carry on the business of the Black Liberation Army. They go on vacation, they go visit their aunt or someone, okay? They lend us their car, they lent us out of that. That's how she got out the country. There's always been Black folks in the Black community. There was always a Black underground. There was always an underground railroad. And I want to give a shout out to all of those older folks who used to hide us, who used to lie for us, who used to give us their ID and buy for us. I want to say thank you, and that Black people, I still love you, and that so this relationship is real. The Black Panther Party was always about the streets. It was always about empowering poor people and the disenfranchised. That's what the Rainbow Coalition was about. Wasn't Jimenez and the Chicanos, weren't they a street gang? Weren't the Patriots, them Yahoos, a bunch of street crackers? So let's not get this twisted. What was Awu Kwan in Chinatown? They used to be the Tongs and the young gangs running around Chinatown. Same thing with the Chicanos in Texas. Okay, we were always about the grassroots youth who were on the streets, and that may have been one of the um, uh, somewhat of a fault to the party, because you had a black educational black young class who were going to school, who were learning, who were very smart, you know, and and they felt kind of like, you know, they weren't street enough, they weren't, you know, down enough, and so these were the Negroes that fell victim to the Lyndon Baines Johnson war on poverty, and became black entrepreneurs, and ultimately started pimping black poverty. And they've been pimping poverty and pimping black folks all the way up to the Congressional Black Caucus ever since.
I just want to say very quickly that you know, I don't really I see some of the chat about comments about Sankofa and you know, in some ways I'm inspired by, you know, by Dhoruba, to be honest, but it's not something that I, you know, want to, you know, encourage. You know, like my own personal interaction with them is one thing, but I'm not certainly trying to discourage or to besmirch the importance of that bookstore or Garima himself and his films, or Sharikiana's films to Black people. I'm not at all trying to say that. I am disappointed that we were sort of disinvited to, you know, after our hate awards thing a couple years ago, and we, you know, I'm disappointed that they have not invited me, for instance, to do a book talk about a live reinvention, but the bookstore is used as a scene in that Netflix documentary to hate on our collection in favor of Manning Marable's work. You know, I'm disappointed in all of that. But anyway, the reality is that was said. I was there. We had a little interaction about it. It was many years ago, and it just came up when we were talking. So I just want to speak. You know,
Jared, I know a lot of times we talk. You've always gotten, you know, this flack from what I consider rightist intellectual orthodoxy. You see, black orthodoxy. You know, and it's expected that they would prefer Manny Marable's book over yours and the other brother. It's expected. I just said that. I just said the first question you need to ask these Negroes: what was you doing in 1969? Huh? What organization were you in? What were you mobilizing for? You know, everybody wasn't marching out the student building with guns, negotiating the Black Studies program. Now, don't get it twisted. You see, so and if you notice, ever since the demise of the Black Panther Party, we had hundreds of thousands of people who will tell you, "Oh, my parents were in the party." They don't lie to their children. You see. So the rediscovering of the Black radical tradition means a re-examination of oneself, which is something that most cultural nationalists, who are narrow nationalists, by the way, have a problem with. Self-analysis, okay? I mean, nobody's perfect. The Black Panther Party was far from perfect and committed many strategic and tactical errors. Its members committed many errors and mistakes, myself included. You see, we were on the right side of the barricade. And that's what I told these young kids who were the children of white radicals, Bernardine Dorn and all of them, the children who wanted to interview me, and I wouldn't talk to them. I said, because first of all, when once the radical era ended, they went back to the corporations, they went back to the business as usual and their white skin privileges. And my comrades, Sundiata, Koli, Mumia, Abu Jamal, they still in prison. You understand? So it is what it is. And they said, well, they were going to be critical of their parents because their parents were radicals, but they never produced anything and blah, 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 blah. I said, let me tell you something with your snotty ass. I said, your parents were on the right side of the barricade. They were on the right side of history, whatever their shortcomings is. What side of history are you on now with your digital ass? What side are you on with your hashtag movement ass? What side of history are you on? Or do you even know you're making history right now? You see? So whatever our shortcomings were, whatever the shortcomings of those brothers who adopted cultural nationalism was at the time. I mean, I had a conversation with Amiri Baraka before he died, and he told me, he said, look, man, I realized that black faces in high places was a mistake. You know, it was a mistake. And I didn't see the contradiction of class having such an impact on caste and black folks. But I realized that now that y'all were right about class. You see? That's what Amiri told me. You see, and you
And he
know,
still beat me up in 2008 over that Baraka decision, though. I mean, not Baraka, the Obama vote, but already, all due
well, I
respect.
would have
Rest in
beat you up
peace.
too.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I didn't vote for him. I was saying don't vote for him, and he was saying we had to. So
well, it is what.
I can't. I'm sorry. He was no. All due respect, he earned whatever, man. Much love to Amiri Baraka. Now, I just think that was one of those funny moments, man. That was just one of those funny moments, man. Listen, speaking of being on the right side of the barricade, the film, there are two moments that BuzzFeed praises the film for. When we see Jake Winters, Spurgeon Jake Winters is not allowed to visit Jimmy Palmer, so he begins reciting Claude McKay outside his hospital room. And they talk about when Black Panthers try to defend the headquarters against the police. So we see some of the shootouts with the police. We do see some of the sort of I guess guerrilla warfare of Jimmy Palmer. But as I said in my own little criticism, what we do see is just the violence meted out against Black people. And though it's acknowledged that white police officers were killed in some of these exchanges, that all happens off camera, where the violence that Black people suffer is on camera, almost in full display. But anyway, in reference to those 2 points, the trying to visit Jimmy Palmer after he's hospitalized in that shootout, and then the shootout with the police defending Panther headquarters. What would you want to say to maybe better help people understand what was happening in that, or what the context of all of that really was?
Well, I'll admit that I remember when Spurgeon was killed, but as to the details about the shootout, I mean, I don't believe any that maybe one or two of these shootouts was just fabricated for artistic drama. I don't even know that they took place. I mean, what they're saying is that Fred was in a shootout with the Chicago Police Department before he was killed, and
not Fred himself, but the chapter itself was, and then there was some debate.
Well, I just
they
explained
say that it actually happened, but that O'Neill. The only question was whether O'Neill was actually there. He's shown to be there in the film, but in real life, there's some dispute.
Well, as I pointed out, when by the time Fred was well, like I said, this whole thing with the Panther 21, which occurred in April of 1969, okay, the agent that set Bobby up in New Haven had traveled to several places. I believe he traveled to Detroit. I believe he traveled to Chicago. At every place he traveled to, those chapters were raided by the police. Many for possession of suspicion of illegal weapons and stuff like that, I don't think that the purpose of showing these shootouts would reveal that it was part of the counterintelligence program of national repression and using agent provocateurs for the pretext for these raids. And they used them as the pretext for the raids in Philly. They used it as the pretext for the raids in Chicago, in Detroit, in the Desire Projects, in New Orleans. And the Black Panther Party had to react to this. It had to react to this because usually in these types of incidents, it's some type of action that the provocateur initiated that caused the raid. You see what I'm saying? So then it becomes an issue of party discipline and controlling members of the party. So I'm not familiar with this whole so-called emotional back and forth between Spurgeon and Palmer. I can't speak to that personally. It's not part of of anything that I have saw in the over 10,000 pages of counterintelligence files I got in my case. So I would have to take a pass on that, but I do know that this particular agent, I can't remember his name. I think the Bob Boyle will probably have it on the tip of his tongue if he's watching this, and I hope he writes in that this guy went from chapter to chapter, sowing dissent and division and causing police raids that had dire consequences for the local chapters. I know he did it in Newark. He did it in, he may have did it in Boston, but Boston tended to be a more stable chapter. Yeah, Boston really didn't go through that type of, the repression was different. You see, so I can't speak about these particular shootouts, but I do know that the Black Panther Party and its premises were always subject to executive mandate, Central Committee mandate #1, that we will defend the Black Panther Party office, we will defend our territory, we defend ourselves and our community. So I wouldn't doubt that, that the guns got drawn under those circumstances. And I'm not going to deal in any minutiae, on whether the police are on camera when they get shot or whether they're off camera when they get shot. That's
Tom Seasway disagrees with me, but I actually think it's an important point, and I think we might disagree. I'll go back and look at it, but I remember vividly that at the point where we see the brother stand over the police officer with the shotgun to take the final shot, they fade to black, and it reminded me exactly what happened in the Nat Turner film by Nate Parker. After seeing hours of black people being brutalized at the moment of the rebellion.
Wait, hold on. He said the brother stands over a pig and he shoots him. Is this in this movie, Judas?
Yes, it's in the Judas film, but they fade to black. So you don't see that.
Okay, let me comment on that.
Okay.
Let me tell you where that came from. Foster and Laurie on the Lower East Side were shot and killed. Purportedly by soldiers of the Black Liberation Army. And the guy that wrote this book, I forgot his name, he wrote this book called Target Blue. And Daly, he was made a police commissioner. He portrayed the shooting of these two cops in just that fashion, that the BLA soldiers shot these cops in the back, ran up and danced around them and shot their prone bodies and shot them in the head while they danced and shouted and then ran away. That never happened. Never happened. So I see that they took what never happened on the East Coast and they put it in Chicago. I don't know that happened. I don't believe that happened. You see, usually, BLA soldiers didn't have time to dance around and shoot dead bodies on the ground. You had to get moving after the guns was drawn to keep it moving. So I doubt very seriously that happened. It's a portrayal to show, and I can understand now what you mean, why it faded to black. It's to show the savagery. It's to show the unremitting hatred that we had for the police, whereas the snitch is ambivalent about betraying black folks. He's the Judas. He got a conscience. You see, so I'm saying that's device. I know that it was later admitted, even by other journalists, that Daly took poetic license in describing the assassination of Foster and Laurie on the Lower East Side. That whole idea of standing over someone and shooting them is a popular myth that police have been using ever since. And they always tell you how a black man who runs into the police station with a gun and slays 6 cops in a shootout and then runs away and gets killed is a coward. Now, I don't know what coward gonna run into a den of armed agents and shoot it out with them, and he's some kind of punk, he's some kind of coward. Okay? So our courage, our willingness to lay down our lives for what we believe has always been diminished. And the barbarity of our murders, as we saw in the George Floyd video, where we had policemen who posted a poster for Valentine's Day saying, with George Floyd's picture saying, "You take my breath away." You see? So we need to understand what that really means. So I doubt very seriously that ever happened, and all this poetic.
But Tonda C's way, my point is, in that scene, you see the cop on the ground. He's laying up, begging for his life. The brother stands over him with the shotgun. The scene cuts to black, and you hear the shot. My only point in bringing that up is that I think these are intentional cinematic devices because, one, these films are intended to not appease black audiences. They're targeting white affluent audiences who don't want to see black people killing white cops on screen. In the same way, they don't want to see a film about Nat Turner where they actually have to watch white slave masters who pull black little girls out of bed be saved on screen from being shown cut to pieces. So that's the point I'm bringing up. The reason I noticed that cut, because we do see all of this violence. We see black people with bullet holes written in them. We see all kinds of stuff happen to black people. But the opposite I'm saying is not true. Now, again, if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering it incorrectly, if my notes are incorrect, that's fine. But anyway, Dhoruba, that was my only point on that. So I just want to clarify that. Let me show you at least one more, because I know we're going to have to start heading towards a close here in a minute. But there's one more. You've already touched on this point, but I'd like you to reiterate it because it comes up often in discussions of the film, and that is the very emotional speech depicted of Fred Hampton after he's released from jail. Where we see, a very well acted scene. Rosa Clemente was on with us and said that when they were there shooting it, it was done in like 16 different takes, and Daniel, the actor, is like, goes into a trance almost. He's like, it's very powerful and emotional. But your point that I think I'd like you to reiterate again about why Hampton was actually targeted, having nothing to do with his charisma, I think is appropriate in response to this scene being highlighted by so many as being so powerful.
Well, one of the major factors, social factors and political factors that we had to deal with back at that time was our image, our perception. This, black leather jackets and berets and this macho posturing and guns and all of this stuff, right? And some people who look at this in retrospect will say, well, it was a lot of posturing, there was a lot of symbolism and blah, 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 blah. But like I said, we were at war. And one of the major features of war is armed propaganda. We didn't carry guns just because we were in our mode of violence and we love guns. We would rather go to bed with a warm gun than our wife, you see. It was because the gun was a means to an end. It was a means to organize black people in a white supremacist society in which the very notion of a black person armed is a panacea, is horrifying to white folks. Okay, they're terrified of this, like they were terrified of Nat Turner, like they were terrified of the very notion that black people would, they would somehow come for vengeance and payback if they had guns and we didn't keep them in check. Okay, so this image that we had, and I'm going to go back to what I said about the Panther Party being one of the three most popular respected organizations in the United States by black people at that time. They were respected in part because of our image, because our image reflected what we stood for. It reflected that Black Panther leaping at you. You understand? Ready to defend himself. You see, and so that's an image that's positive in one way, and it could be negative in another way. It could be seen as negative in another way by those who are more committed to a less militant or confrontational approach to black people's struggle. if you see what I'm trying to say here. So at that scene, if it's emotional, we need to understand the times. If we looked outside the window of the Panther 21 trial, when we were first arrested, there were thousands of people, hundreds of people marching around the tombs, marching around the Supreme Court in Lower Manhattan, you understand, chanting Black Power, power to the people, off the pig, okay? Thousands of them. Okay, hundreds of them when we were upstairs, and it was resonating throughout the tombs. And every inmate in the tomb start rattling their stuff and start talking about power to the people, power to the people, and the whole jail start rocking. That's the energy. Okay, so it's not surprising that if a Fred Hampton comes out of prison into the Black community where the Black Panther Party has been organizing and been standing up for them, that they would come to a church and they would greet them. When I got out of prison, they accused me of inciting a riot and people taking over the subway on downtown, and all I did was give a little small speech saying that Nixon wasn't going to tell me what to say. Fuck Richard Nixon, and man, that wasn't nothing charismatic. You see, the energy of the times. When I first joined the Black Panther Party, two members of the Black Panther Party were out in front of the Black Panther office in Brooklyn. It was a hot summer August day, and they were on the megaphone. And somehow the police came along and got in a confrontation with them, arrested them, and they were roughed up and taken to the police station. An instant demonstration jumped up. Sonny Carson popped out of nowhere. You remember Sonny Carson, who used to lead Independent Corps in Brooklyn? Abu Badika. Sonny Carson popped out of nowhere, and I was just in the party like 2 hours, and we all marched down to the police station, 500, 600 strong, And Sonny jumped up on the steps and talked about, we want to see our brothers. We want to see what kind of condition they're in. And they had a black inspector, one of the first black inspectors in the NYPD at that time. And he was at that station. And he came out and he said, look, I'll take a delegation in to see him. If you saw the energy there, if you saw the chants, if you saw the people, ordinary people, black folks jumping up and down, and you will understand there's nothing exceptional to Fred Hampton coming out of jail to a inspirational rally and where people are supportive of him. That's what the Black Panther Party was about, leading from the front. And that's what it was about. Black folks, black power, and black self-defense. So I don't think that scene really contradicts what I'm saying about he wasn't killed because of charisma. The energy at that scene tells you why COINTELPRO saw the Chicago chapter as a threat.
Okay, right on. Well, let's see. There are a couple more we can go through real quick, but I want to make sure, is there anything else that I have not asked you or invited you to say that you would like to add before we start to head to a close, or something you want to touch on? Otherwise, I can even go through and find some of the comments or questions, or if folks have any that we haven't touched on, please restate them if I haven't seen them or gotten to them.
You asking me?
Yeah, well, I was just asking you initially if you had anything you wanted to make sure we got to.
Well, I'm just concerned that, and you know, a lot of the people, including yourself, have stomped all over me and criticized me for not putting some of the things and intricacies that I said down on paper and writing it. And because, you know, verily by the token of time, man isn't lost and nobody get out this life alive. I got that. I understand that. But really, I have a reluctance to contribute to most of the madness, because if you recall, recently some comrades and I wrote an open letter to a number of prominent hip-hop artists. I believe one was Killer Mike, another one was what's his name? T.I. Yeah, T.I. and Ludacris showed up, and some other folks showed up. And the purpose of that was to try to get them to understand that we were at an important crossroad, and that black people that were being mobilized at that particular time in the summer when the Black Lives Matter protests, George Floyd stuff was happening, that mobilization was different than organization, and that we need to organize black people. and that black folks and people of color and poor people needed to organize themselves into a united front, because what's happening in America now is the consolidation of a garrison state, a white supremacist racist state. And this is why white supremacy couldn't be denounced outright. And now white folks is looking at this as the onslaught of the second civil war. They're gearing up, they're armed to the teeth. And what are we talking about? What are we talking about here? You know, we talking about whether Kanye West just got divorced. What are we talking about here? You know, we're talking about Kamala Harris, you understand, and black girl magic. What are we talking about here? Hashtag movements. You know, what are we seriously talking about here? Planets going to hell in a handbasket. You know, capitalism is in crisis. People are locked down in the pandemic. You know, they want black folks to take the first jab, you know, of a vaccine from a health industry that we know has used us for guinea pigs. So now we in a serious bind here. You see what I'm saying? So I'm saying all of this to say that we must understand what fascism in America and white supremacy in America is, and how it manifests itself every day in its domestic and foreign policy, and that we do have power in our local and state districts to change the paradigm and relationship of power between us and our enemies. And make no mistake about it, America, white supremacy, this United States government is our enemy. They are not our friends. They are not someone that we could reform. You cannot reform white supremacy. If you could, Fred Douglass would have did it a long time ago. You have to have an abolitionist movement. You have to abolish it. You have to understand that our movement is not a Black Lives Matter movement, because white folks never cared anything about black folks. So white folks didn't mind, and black folks' lives didn't matter. It's mind over matter. So we need to understand that it ain't about that. It's about black liberation. It's about the liberation of oppressed people. And when we see that, we can see that black people are out in the streets all over the world against the same type of state power that has kicked them to the curb, that has not looked out for their health, that has not taken care of their environment, that has not addressed their issues. Okay? So this is a global movement in which we are at the lead. We are in the belly of the beast. And if we don't lead, you know, we deserve what happens to us. And we can't talk about, you know, well, Biden is this and Biden is that. Biden is a born-again white supremacist, racist dog. And he's the head of the empire. And when Kamala becomes head of the empire, she's going to be commander-in-chief of the United States military. And don't think that the United States military is running around saving people from floods and stuff. No, they're in the Sahel right now. They're in the Congo right now. They're in Ghana right now. They're training right now in northern Nigeria. They are killing Africans around the world and people of color. So I want black folks to understand that we can't mourn. We have to organize. That we need to understand that we have to organize ourselves and understand who's our enemy and who's our friends.
Dhoruba, one question that I saw Sister Ricky asked that I sort of alluded to at the very beginning, I'm curious about is do you have any particular thoughts about the attorney Ben Crump being the one who is the one at the front of this press conference about the revelation about the deathbed confession?
Well, I mean, wasn't that Reverend Al's right hand man? Yeah, well, was it Reverend Al? Reverend Al himself used to be a FBI snitch. So I mean, why wouldn't he be there with a mic to catch the last breath of a dying snitch? You know, so I mean, Crump is Crump. I mean, he pops up.
Just to be accurate, he wasn't there to get it. He's representing the nephew that was reporting it.
Oh, he's representing the nephew. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. This is the digital age. I mean, he could have got. I guess it could have been done on TikTok, but
oh my goodness!
Listen, man, I hate to be irreverent, man. I know I don't hate to be irreverent. I like to
stop lying.
I'm gonna stop lying, right? Stop lying. But you know, I guess this goes into what I was saying, that there is serious class misleadership in the African community, and one of those tendencies is manifested in leadership by victimhood. And oppressed people cannot be led by victims, you see. And in every turn that we see, whether it was from Trayvon Martin to George Floyd, they always bring out the families of these victims, who have never actually been in anything other than survival mode all their life. They've just been ordinary Black folks. When this tragedy befell them and their loved one was slain by the vicious white supremacist police state. So now they're thrust to the front.
That's actually my favorite. Sorry to interrupt, but that's actually my favorite press conference I think that I've seen of yours, and I've seen so many. But when I think you were Cynthia McKinney, I believe Brother Kalanji was with you as you were talking about and you were talking about this exact point at a press conference, and somebody in the press asked you all this question of, well, why are you speaking on behalf of the families and the victims of the police killings, and who are you and Cynthia to be doing it? And I thought your response was perfect. He was saying, why should the victims be the ones doing it? The organizers and the movement builders are the ones.
But that press conference you're talking about, I was the victim. That's the one where the police beat me up and attacked me when I was moving into my own house. Because some white folks saw me moving into my house, because the house used to be empty, and thought that I was a robber, and they had to relate. They were local snitches for the police, and they called a boy up at the police department. They zoomed on over there and snatched me, threw me down in front of my house, and beat me up. You see, and it got caught on camera. So when we had the press conference, Mauli Davis, who was my lawyer, the press asked me, we were calling for the organization of a national committee to combat police fascism, And the reporter said, well, why are you calling the police fascists? Why are you making those accusations? And that's when I responded the way you said. But I want to say that if we remember back just a few months ago, Sharpton conducted a march on Washington, remember? And the feature of this march was he brought together almost every major victim of police brutality, put them all up on the stage in Washington, and they all had something to say. And what they all basically said is that we demand justice, that we have to hold the police accountable, that we have to wait for the system to take its course, that we can't burn nothing down, that we can't do nothing like that, but we got to do that. That's what they would think, and we got to vote for, whoever, you see. And my point was that these people deserve our strength. They deserve our right to demand justice for them. But they are not the leaders of a movement. You have never had a movement that was successful in which the victims were its leaders. You had movements that held up victims as martyrs, that fought for their rights, that held them up for an example. But the family of the victims, the grandmother and the aunt and the brother, they wanted the leaders told, oh, we got to go home now. Let's wait for a decision. Come on, man. And the problem with people like Crump is, he may be well-intentioned, I don't know about all that because he's hanging out with Sharpton, and that draws all types of flies and stuff. However, having said that, this guy hasn't won a case since he was on the bar, since he came up with Trayvon. He hasn't won one case. Now you would figure that, man, I ain't gonna take no lawyer that ain't won no cases. But he has got a lot of settlements though. He's managed to come to. I was in Geneva when he came through with the family of his brother that was just killed, and the Human Rights Committee took time out to hear what they had to say. And you know what they said to the United Nations Human Rights Commission on Torture and Violence? They said that we beg you, you are our last resort for justice. We want justice for our slain relative. And this is the UN, who has absolutely no jurisdiction over the US court system whatsoever. Now, when was the last time they was in solidarity with the Palestinians? When was the last time their representative on Capitol Hill in the Black and Puerto Rican caucus was standing out front demanding justice for slain Africans or the victims of Trump's drone bombing? You haven't seen that, right? You haven't seen that at all. And that's their legal representative of this family. That's their representatives in Washington, D.C. Okay, they stand lockstep with U.S. foreign policy and U.S. violence, both home and abroad. You cannot have a movement led by victims. Okay, and victims come on the international set to draw sympathy. And then what do you do with the political sympathy that they draw? They came there, everybody quietly listened to them, they got back on the plane, and they left. And what's changed? What's changed? You see, so the people like Crump, like I said, he's a young man, he might be very sincere. I'm not going to speak on his personal sincerity, but he has not been a real people's attorney, He's not he's not the type of lawyer, a black lawyer that defended us in the Panther 21 case. He's not the type of people's lawyers that defended us in the courts. So I just want to say that this is the age of hashtags. This is the age when perception is reality. So I guess he fits right in.
Well, Dhoruba, man, thank you again, man. It's always a pleasure to catch up with you. I appreciate what you had to go through to get where you are so we could have this talk. Obviously, anytime, and I'm hopeful that and thankful to Brother Kenyatta for helping us get this connection. And I'm very hopeful that the proposed idea of a BLA reunion is going to take place on this platform soon too. So we could, I just want to tease that and leave that out there a little bit too. But Dhoruba, man,
if I could do that from Cuba, that'd be dope,
even
right?
Better. That'd be even better. So
then that's inviting a drone attack, bro.
Well, we could always.
I could use a VPN, right?
No, we get a VPN. The VPN. We pre-record it at an undisclosed time and an area.
Yeah, I do get on a VPN like that. I'm broadcasting from Prague.
Yeah,
I'm in Prague.
And it won't advertise that one for the live, but to come out later. But look, man, it's always a pleasure, man, and thank you for everything, for the work you have done, for the work you are doing, for the work you will do. It's just a pleasure, man, and it's always an honor to get to have these conversations. So thank you, man, and salute, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Salute to you too, man. Thank you, Jared, man. You all, and I know you got coming up community control of police. So I'm gonna try to get me some light suit over here and watch this. You understand? Yeah, I'm in the homeland, man. That's right. That's right. Look, I'm back. I'm here.
So what I'll do is check your email. I'll send you the link for that, and if you want, you can join the studio and join that conversation. So
yeah, because I'm here for a minute, man. I'm gonna sit here for a minute.
Well, there it is. So there it is. So,
yeah, okay, man.
So we'll take a quick break. You get your meal. I'll run to the restroom. Everybody get your next beverage or whatever, and come on right back for much more right. with Dhoruba. Hey, thank you, man. We'll see you in a couple minutes then. So get your refresh. We'll be back in a minute. Brothers Max Rameau and Net for Freeman from Pan-African Community Action and Black Alliance for Peace as well will be here to talk about their latest piece linked in the description. We'll post all that and again about community control of the police, and then Baba Dhoruba will come on right back with us for more. So don't go anywhere. I mix what I like. I mix what I like live, and more importantly, Black Power Media got a lot coming up. So yeah, get that beverage, get that quick bathroom break or whatever, and we will be right back. Peace if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say, and we will continue this whirlwind with Dhoruba and you in just a minute. Back in a minute. Peace. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.